It's the Eagle Community Television Forum with your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi everyone, I'm Gary Shorman, and this is the Forum on Eagle Community Television. The Forum's brought to you by Hayes Med. We have a fun guest today. I say fun because everybody gets a chance to live in the weather in western Kansas. Our guest gets to forecast the weather for us. That's always more of a challenge. And our guest is Dan Holliday, who's Eagle Meteorologist. And frankly, you do weather for radio stations all across the Midwest, but we're fortunate to have you on our team as well. Good to have you on the program.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You know what? I mentioned the weather and how hard it is to forecast. But when you take a look outside in Kansas, I don't know how many different forecast scripts you actually have, but weather in Kansas is a challenge.
It is a challenge, and I think it helped growing. I grew up in Butler County on a farm east of El Dorado, and the way it all worked was, anytime there was a storm, I watched what was rolling in from the west, and just became enamored with it. And I think throughout the years, anytime when you're born and you're raised in Kansas, it's just something in your blood, and you love trying to figure out what's going to happen next. So there's a number of different, I guess you want to say, a different analysis you have to look at to figure out exactly what's going to happen. But I think being from here certainly does help.
How long have you been in the business, Dan?
31 years now.
31 years. The first time you were forecasting, are you better today than you were 31 years ago, or do you just sound better?
I started in the radio business, obviously, and then sort of moved into the forecasting business, not really until 2005 when I finished meteorology school. But no doubt it takes some time to really get it down, but I would say that I did it more on an amateur level for a long time, but more professionally in the last 10 years.
You mentioned meteorology school. What does that actually mean? Because it's so hard to forecast the weather even for anybody, but to go to school, what do they teach you, and how does that work?
Well, there's different levels, and a lot of folks go to a four-year college to learn everything and meteorology today includes everything from the science background all the way to mathematics, and you get into physics and everything. What I did was broadcast meteorology. It's a different side where you learn not only how to deliver it on the air, but also the science behind it. Not quite as intricate, but essentially it's 4 years of work that was in a 3-year program.
And which one of the schools actually teaches you to do it right, so you get every forecast right every time?
That's hard. I don't think there is one out there. I just don't.
Why is that?
It's hard because obviously it's a science, and it's not an exact science. I wish that we could answer everything, but the most interesting thing I find about weather is we still use weather balloons to predict it. With all the computers that we have, the computers need the old-fashioned weather balloon that we send up, and when they go up, there's different things that can happen. There are different readings. Some of the instruments bring back maybe different numbers or slightly different numbers. We know that during severe weather days, we have to launch both in Dodge City and Topeka here in the state, launch sometimes 3 times a day rather than 2 because the first 2 didn't give them enough information. It's a hard thing to crack and be exact on.
One of the things I know, I grew up on a farm, so you're always interested in rainfall, trying to get it at the right time, trying to do that sort of thing. But I'm also a pilot, and when you're a pilot today, I know had a chance to fly and had the barometric pressure is real high compared to what it was yesterday, and even more so than the day before. You see all those changes take place, but is it more of a timing issue, or is it more of just there's so many variables that you can't make it correct every time?
There's a lot of variables, and for instance, let's talk about winter weather, where in the winter, we have a system that comes in. A lot of times it starts with a low pressure system that moves in, moisture gets pulled in, and then the temperature is different at different levels of the atmosphere. So you're dealing with, you could have freezing rain, you could have sleet, you could have snow, you just could have rain. And so any one temperature in the atmosphere at certain levels can totally changes the outcome. If you have rain in a winter storm instead of freezing rain, obviously it's not as bad, but it affects everything we do. So there's just many variables, and when it goes back to the weather balloon, when they send back a lot of that information, we rely on it so heavily to know one leads to the other, and I think that's what makes it probably more difficult. But on the other hand, the computers that we have today have played into helping us get so much further than we were able to years ago.
Now, we're at the end of October. When you take a look at years going back, How did this year compare to some of the previous other years? Has the climate changed that much in Kansas? Has there been that much change from a weather standpoint compared to maybe some other parts of the world where it's just been crazy?
Well, obviously El Nino has played a factor in that. That's the warming of the Pacific waters where it gets really warm out near the equator. It's out obviously to the east a little bit of Hawaii, but that affects the storm systems that come in. Obviously, we saw that change this year. There were some storm systems that didn't really affect us per se, but other parts of the country. That's just one factor in forecasting the weather. But this whole season itself feels like it started a little bit later climatologically than what we normally have. We noticed that summer is hanging on a little bit longer. It also took a little bit longer for us to warm up. I think that's the biggest difference. But we have had a little variety. Thankfully, we haven't had the violent tornadoes this year that we have had some years in the past, so it was relatively quiet.
I know in the past few weeks and this last month there have been some hurricanes that have caused some real damage on the East Coast. And I just had a chance, again, I watch weather a lot, and you watch that and you see, even with all the computers, all the analytical things that go into that, there must have been 10 different tracks that they were forecasting, which means we don't know where it's going.
Yeah, and they had to send in hurricane hunters to drop what they call radiosondes, different instruments from the top into the storm to figure it out.
Who gets that job?
Oh, that's the Air Force reconnaissance planes that have to do a lot of that. And in fact, they have opportunities, I believe, for the media to ride along. So you being a pilot, maybe you want to ride with a hurricane hunter.
Yeah, only if you go with me. Would you go with me through one of those hurricanes?
I'm bad enough riding in a regular plane. I don't know. I get nervous in the air anyway. But in that situation, it took a while to know exactly where it was going to go. Thankfully, it didn't go on land. We know what it did do is it sort of stayed over the Bahamas, caused a lot of damage there, and then of course helped pull all that moisture into Charleston, South Carolina, where so much flooding occurred recently.
Is there a part of the world that is more fun to predict than others?
I think this part of the world right here is fun in the spring. The severe weather setups are unlike anywhere in the world. I think it's a challenge. It's really exciting. I wouldn't want to have to forecast for somewhere, and I do, but in California, in Northern California, where for the next 7 days it's going to be maybe 80, 85 degrees, and it just doesn't rain out there right now. But so I think the Midwest and the Central Plains are the most fun.
I know this past summer there were some groups, national groups, that were in doing some of the studies of weather and taking a look at how fronts and where the temperature changes and how that affects tornadoes.
Right.
Do you get results from some of those as well, or where do you get your additional research on those types of things?
Well, there are different publications from the American Meteorological Society, and they send out reports that some of the folks that are government funded, like the Vortex group, that have gone out, and they send students and crews out to research with maybe seeing some of the big radars, the Dow and things like that. University of Oklahoma is big in that, and they bring back data, and usually we find out in publications after they have a chance to write it up. We learn more. I think we're learning a little bit more about tornadoes each year, but we can't prevent them. You know, it's just one of those things we deal with, just to learn a little bit more about how to warn for them.
Well, we're going to talk about that when we come back, because I'm going to ask the question about how it's changed. You've been actively involved for about 10 years now, but really following the weather. I want to talk about how technology has changed that. And when we get to the tornado season this next spring, how that helps us maybe get the word to you quicker if there's a dangerous storm on the way. Our guest is Dan Holliday. Our program's brought to you by Hayes Med. We'll be back after this.
It's a beautiful day in our super high-speed internet great customer service neighborhood. Like you, this is where we live. In fact, our company is employee-owned, so it's our goal to improve the quality of life for everyone in our community by delivering faster, more reliable internet, clearer, more feature-laden phone service, quality TV channels, all with the level of customer service you'd expect from people who are your neighbors. Eagle Communications. Our community connected.
Welcome back to the second half of our forum program. I'd like to hear from you. If you have any ideas about future programs, send them to me, gary.shorman@eaglecom.net. You can also find us on Facebook. If you go under Facebook and type in ECTV Forum, you'll find us there. I'd like to connect with you via the Facebook and any sort of email that you could send, so we can have some other future programs that you might want to watch. Our guest today is Dan Holliday, who is a weathercaster overall, but he's a weatherman for Eagle Radio and does a nice job of keeping you in front of the weather. That's where we went into the break talking about how that has changed. When you look at when you even got actively involved 10 years ago, what's changed from 10 years ago to now, and what's changed going back to maybe 50 years to now?
Good question. First of all, let's go back 10 years. Well, we didn't have Facebook and Twitter and a lot of the social media active. Some of them were starting, but obviously we didn't have them to the degree we do now. We didn't have smartphones, and that's changed everything. We know that folks, when they're out and about in a storm, think about the days when we didn't have access to radar or real-time current temperature, and now almost anyone can find out instantly, is the storm moving for a ball game that we're going to. So technology has played a huge role in that. We're able to text each other and say, hey, I think there's a storm coming, and look out. And obviously, radio coverage is more important than ever because people listen in when there's really life-threatening, critical situations that are occurring, such as a tornado.
When you look at technology, is it better? Is the radar better? Obviously, we have it, but has it improved enough to make a difference in early warning time?
Well, a perfect example is not long ago there was a tornado that was not predicted. There was some severe weather that broke out in Charleston, South Carolina. What happened was there was no watch, no severe risk issued. Tornado touches down, and through the new dual polarization radar, they were able to see that there was a debris ball on radar showing up at 1 o'clock in the morning. No one had been warned, so we could see there was a tornado on the ground doing damage in the city of Charleston. That's a huge piece of technology where now, we could see maybe some greens and reds on the radar and said there could be a tornado there. Now we know when it's on the ground, so that's a big, big improvement.
When you say a debris ball, obviously that's the dust created from the tornado. Is there a size reference, or is it just that good it can pick up dust and dirt versus what would be a cloud or wind speed?
Well, it can do all of that, but yeah, I think the larger the reflectivity that comes back, certainly we know that it's a bigger magnitude of a tornado or a storm. So yeah, it can give you a lot of different data depending upon how far you look up in the atmosphere. It just depends on how you tune the radar sort of into the storm itself.
We're coming into the winter season. When you take a look at that, you take a look at the spring season with tornadoes. What should a listener, when they're casually listening along, you come on and do a great job with your forecast, what should they listen for that kind of triggers that, I need to be careful, I need to look ahead a little bit?
Well, the next day obviously is most important to us because we know how tough it is to forecast 2, 3, 4 weeks out. But when it comes down to the very next day, that's what we're really trying to focus on, of what to look for. But we really try and highlight in our forecast on the air, if there's going to be something significant coming up, we may say something like, but coming up this weekend, there's a big storm, could be a blizzard, be listening for it, we'll have details, but as it comes together, we'll watch it. We always try and put that in the forecast to at least let someone know what might be down the road. If maybe we don't have a handle on the exact timing yet, we at least mention it.
You see many times on television, you see the big blizzard and you see everybody is running to the store the last minute to get water, and all the shelves are getting cleaned.
Milk and bread.
Milk and bread,
yeah.
They're gone.
A lot of French toast, right?
Yeah, that's what you have.
Yeah.
What should a viewer do, though, to maybe be prepared? Do the holidays have a box in the basement of things that are important to do? But what do you recommend as a meteorologist seeing these things happen that somebody actually keep for a couple of days? Because electricity can go away. And that means a lot of your computers, some of the other technology all goes away. What do you recommend?
Well, there's so many chargers that are being sold now for smartphones or for computers, tablets. I would say most importantly, make sure you have some sort of a charger because at least if the car has some sort of power, you can keep it recharged so you can at least have communication with someone. You don't think about this a lot. I was in a blizzard 4 or 5 years ago, and all of a sudden it comes into mind, wow, I need a blanket, because, and you joke about it when you hear those types of things, what am I going to use a blanket for? But you never know until it hits, and if you are stranded, it's important to stay warm, it's important you have communication. I would think those would be the two most important of all, and of course, I don't know how many people actually carry around extra gasoline, if they run out of gas, but obviously the first two I think are most critical.
And you say it's better to stay in your car or leave your car if you're in a critical situation like that alongside of a road?
Well, in winter storms like that, obviously, if you can get out or get somebody to give you a ride that that would be the best thing to do to get into a warm place. But we know during severe weather, if we want to transition over to tornado season and you have a severe storm moving in, it's best to be out of the line of the path of the storm and not in a vehicle.
And what about in your home? What do the holidays keep in their home?
Oh my gosh.
Do you have jugs of water and peanut butter and jelly and all that?
You know, you'd be surprised. Not as much as you would think. All the technology and communication gadgets you could possibly imagine, the different screens and radars. But yeah, I think a battery-powered generator I have, which is most important, because once you lose power, you have nothing if you don't have that. So, but yeah, the extra water never hurts, that's for sure.
One of the things that we talk about, kind of joke about, but it's pretty dangerous, is when there is a tornado, how everybody just runs out in their front yard and to watch.
Right.
That's an urge to do in Kansas.
It
because
is.
frankly, you've been in Hayes for a long time, and there's been one tornado that you could see from town, and I was out of town that weekend. So what do you talk about, that urge to go do that? Or do you go out there too? Are you one of them out there in your front yard looking at?
I did. Yeah. I don't have the time now because
you're on
focus.
the air.
Yeah, on the air. But I did. If anyone remembers the Andover tornado of 1991, that was. It was unbelievable, the storm. I actually was chasing that. Hadn't chased storms for very long, but followed it, and it's something that when you see it go through a city, your stomach turns, because you think you're watching a movie, but everyone has that urge to just see something that they don't normally see every day like that. It's amazing to witness, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. The most important thing to do is, if you are doing it, make sure you know you're at a safe enough distance. And the problem is there's been a lot of television shows on that have promoted the fact that you can go out and drive right into it. Those guys have a lot of experience, and even with the experience, it's very dangerous. So it's not something to do unless you can get to a basement quickly.
Well, let's switch gears, end up your winter. Is it going to be stronger, tougher, colder, wetter? What's it going to be this winter?
Everybody asks that question, and I think it's very difficult to be accurate on a long-term basis. What you can see are the trends that are happening. This winter, we know that El Nino is going to play some sort of a role in our weather, and that being that we'll have probably more storms move in. The issue with winter storms isn't so many as when they move onshore from the west coast, all they have to do is go 25 or 50 miles north of us and we get nothing, or 25, 50 miles south of us. That may seem like I'm not answering the question, but I have to say,
you're not.
Yeah. I have to say though that I don't think we know. We can say, oh, it's going to be cold, it's going to be a huge winter, we're going to have 85 inches of snow, but no one knows for sure. We just don't. We're going to have to take each storm at a time.
How do the old Farmer's Almanac folks know what's going to happen?
They use some old-time legendary wisdom. They do, and they put it into it, and they step out on a limb and say, this is what we think might happen. So that's exactly how they do it.
And my guess, you look at the more scientific version every day versus whether the caterpillar are shedding and crawling up trees and all that.
That's true, and you know, it's hard enough to predict the weather 2 days out. When you go 30, 60, 90 days out, it's just, I would rather try and be right and just be honest and say, we just don't know that far out.
Do you keep a score? Like, are you 80% right, 90% right on your forecast?
You know, I don't, and I think one of the reasons is I just love the day-to-day mode of it, that I try not to look back. I do look back at some of the historical events, like big severe weather days or big winter storms where we go, you know, were we right? Were we close on that? Was it 10 inches of snow and we said 4? What happened and why? And we do try and learn from that more than anything, rather than keep a score. But that is a good idea for the future. we may have to try that.
A grade card.
I'm telling you, it could be. I could be in trouble at the end of the year. I don't know.
Well, you know what, Dan? When you come on, and I'm listening on the radio, you come on, there's a level of confidence that you bring of saying, hey, you know what you're talking about, so I appreciate the work that you do, and I know you study and try to do things right. And growing up just down the road from here, like I did, you really appreciate not only the severity of what weather can be, but how important it is to all of us in this part of the world.
Well, thank you. I'll tell you, yeah, weather is so important. It's always going to be important to us here. Obviously, in other parts of the country where it's sunny and 75 every day, it's not as vital. But in this part of the country where agriculture depends on it, where everything we do depends on it, and all of a sudden changes, we get all 4 seasons here. So it's vital and will continue to be right here in Kansas.
Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dan Holliday, who is our Eagle meteorologist, has been our guest on the Forum program this week. The Forum is brought to you by Hayes Med and by Eagle Communications, our community connected.
Hayes Med is your first and best choice for healthcare. They're the only facility providing tertiary level services in this region. With more than 70 physicians and 26 specialties ranging from heart, orthopedic, spine care, cancer, obstetrics and gynecology, wound care, rehabilitation and surgery, including the Da Vinci robotic surgery, Hayes Med is your comprehensive health provider for people throughout Western Kansas. Hayes Med, helping people be healthy.